So the Department of Justice posted on social media that they had discovered over 1 million more documents potentially related to Jeffrey Epstein. The post stated that the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York and the FBI had informed the Department of Justice that they had uncovered over 1 million more documents potentially related to the Jeffrey Epstein case. The DOJ said they've received these documents and are reviewing them for release in compliance with the Epstein Files Transparency Act, existing statutes, and judicial orders. The post continued, "We have lawyers working around the clock to review and make the legally required redactions to protect victims, and we will release the documents as soon as possible. Due to the mass volume of material, this process may take a few more weeks." Let me pause here to point out the timing. This announcement came on Christmas Eve, traditionally one of the slowest news days of the year when most Americans are focused on family and holidays. It's a classic strategy for releasing bad news when you want minimal media attention. And it comes just 5 days after the original December 19th deadline when the DOJ was supposed to have released all Epstein-related files. The Epstein Files Transparency Act, which Congress passed almost unanimously and Trump signed in November, required the DOJ to release all unclassified records, documents, communications, and investigative materials by December 19th. The DOJ missed that deadline. They released a first batch of documents on Friday the 19th, followed by additional releases over the weekend and on Tuesday. Each release was heavily redacted and faced immediate criticism from both survivors and lawmakers. And now on Christmas Eve, they're saying, "Oh, by the way, we just found over 1 million more documents. We'll need a few more weeks to review them." The immediate question is, how did the DOJ not know about these documents before the deadline? These aren't new investigations. Jeffrey Epstein died in 2019. Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted in 2021. The DOJ has had years to catalog what materials they possess, so either they didn't bother to do a thorough search before the deadline, or they knew about these documents and chose not to release them on time. The response from Congress was swift and critical, and it came from both sides of the aisle. Democratic Representative Ro Khanna, who co-authored the Epstein Files Transparency Act with Republican Representative Thomas Massie, posted, "After we said we are bringing contempt, the DOJ is now finding millions more documents to release." He added, "The Epstein class must go." Think about that phrasing. After we said we are bringing contempt. Khanna is suggesting that the DOJ only found these million documents after facing threats of contempt charges for missing the deadline. That implies the documents weren't really lost or unknown. They were being withheld. Republican Representative Thomas Massie, the co-sponsor of the law, was equally harsh. He posted, "DOJ did break the law by making illegal redactions and by missing the deadline." Massie also reposted a video of Attorney General Pam Bondi from February, where she appeared to claim an Epstein client list was sitting on her desk.
Sure. First, to back up on that, in February, I did an interview on Fox, and it's been getting a lot of attention because I was asked a question about the client list, and my response was, "It's sitting on my desk to be reviewed," meaning the file along with the JFK, MLK files as well. That's what I meant by that. Also, to the tens of thousands of video, they turned out to be downloaded by that disgusting Jeffrey Epstein. Child is what they were. Never going to be released, never going to see the light of day. To him being an agent, I have no knowledge about that. We can get back to you on that. And the minute missing from the video, we released the video showing definitively the video was not conclusive, but the evidence prior to it was showing he committed suicide. And what was on that, there was a minute that was off the counter. And what we learned from Bureau of Prisons was every night, they redo that video. It's old, from like 1999. So every night the video is reset, and every night should have the same minute missing. So we're looking for that video to release that as well, showing that a minute is missing every night. And that's it on Epstein.
Bondi later clarified she was referring to Epstein files, not a client list. Massie wrote, "So what you're saying is the files were never on AG Pam Bondi's desk like she claimed in this video?" Democratic Representative Robert Garcia, the highest-ranking Democrat on the House Oversight Committee, issued a particularly strong statement. It's outrageous that Trump's DOJ has illegally withheld over 1 million documents from the public. Every day we see lies, incompetence, missed deadlines, and illegal redactions. Garcia went further, calling for Attorney General Pam Bondi to testify before Congress under oath, and saying his committee wants to hear from whistleblowers or anyone at the DOJ who can assist in bringing justice for survivors. On the same day as the million documents announcement, a bipartisan group of 12 senators called for an audit of the DOJ's handling of the Epstein files. In a letter to DOJ Acting Inspector General Don Bertiome, the senators said the DOJ had violated the Epstein Files Transparency Act. The senators wrote, "Given the administration's historic hostility to releasing the files, politicization of the Epstein case more broadly, and failure to comply with the Epstein Files Transparency Act, a neutral assessment of its compliance with the statutory disclosure requirements is essential." That phrase, historic hostility to releasing the files, is significant. These senators are pointing out that the Trump administration initially opposed releasing additional Epstein materials. It was only after bipartisan congressional pressure and the passage of the Transparency Act that they agreed to release anything at all. Let me walk you through what has been released over the past week, because the content is important to understanding the criticism. The first batch of documents was released on Friday, December 19th, the deadline. But it wasn't complete. The DOJ posted tens of thousands of pages on a website they're calling the Epstein Library, but large portions were heavily redacted, and critical documents were missing entirely. For example, no financial documents were included. Think about that. Financial records would show who paid Epstein, who benefited from his network, where the money came from, and where it went. Those are potentially the most important documents for understanding who enabled Epstein's operation, and they weren't released. Additionally, all 119 pages of grand jury material that a federal judge had ordered unsealed were completely redacted. Every single page was just black boxes. A judge said these should be made public, and the DOJ made them public in the technical sense that they posted them, but they're completely unreadable. Then there were the botched redactions. Some documents had victims' names left visible when they should have been protected. Other documents had names redacted in one place but visible in another place. The technical execution was inconsistent and sloppy. Multiple releases over the weekend and on Tuesday included more materials, and these contained several notable references to President Trump. A 2020 email from a federal prosecutor states that Trump was listed as a passenger on Epstein's private jet at least 8 times between 1993 and 1996. The email, gathered during the investigation that led to Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction, shows that prosecutors collected this evidence about Trump's flights. Another document shows that the DOJ subpoenaed Trump's Mar-a-Lago club before Maxwell's trial in 2021. We don't know what they were looking for or what they found, but the subpoena indicates the DOJ considered Mar-a-Lago potentially relevant to their investigation. The files also revealed that investigators found a photo of Trump with Ghislaine Maxwell while examining Steve Bannon's iPhone in June 2021. An email whose sender and recipient are redacted states, "I've been looking through Steve Bannon's iPhone 7 on Celebrite. As I was going through the images from that phone, I found an image of Trump and Ghislaine Maxwell on Bannon's phone." Celebrite is a software company that provides digital forensic tools often used by law enforcement to extract data from phones. Now, it's important to note that Trump has never been accused by law enforcement of any involvement in Epstein's crimes. He denies any wrongdoing. The DOJ itself has stated that some documents include untrue and sensationalist claims about Trump that were submitted to the FBI right before the 2020 election. But the fact remains that Trump's name appears throughout these documents, and the investigation into Epstein clearly touched on Trump's social connections and business relationships. One particularly controversial document was a letter purportedly signed by Jeffrey Epstein to convicted sex offender Larry Nassar. The letter contained what appeared to be a lewd reference to Trump, stating, "Our president also shares our love of young, nubile girls. When a young beauty walked by, he loved to grab snatch." The DOJ quickly determined this letter was fake. They announced on social media that the FBI concluded it was not authentic based on several factors. The writing doesn't match Epstein's handwriting. It was postmarked from Virginia 3 days after Epstein's death when Epstein was in New York, and the return address didn't list the jail where Epstein was held or include his inmate number, which is required for outgoing mail. The letter was marked with a return to sender stamp in the DOJ file, indicating it was flagged as suspicious at the time. But here's where it gets interesting. The DOJ included this fake letter in their release anyway, because the law requires them to release all documents in their possession related to Epstein. When a journalist questioned why they would release a dubious document, the DOJ's official account responded testily, "Because the law requires us to release all documents related to Jeffrey Epstein in our possession, so that's what we are doing, you dope. Are you suggesting we break the law?" That response is noteworthy for its aggressive tone. It's unusual for a government agency to call a journalist a dope on social media. The files also contained previously unseen photographs of former President Bill Clinton with Epstein. One shows Clinton swimming in a pool with Ghislaine Maxwell. Another shows Clinton sitting in a hot tub with a woman whose face was redacted. Clinton, like Trump, has never been accused by authorities of any involvement in Epstein's crimes. A spokesman for Clinton said, "There are two types of people here. The first group knew nothing and cut Epstein off before his crimes came to light. The second group continued relationships with him after. We're in the first." Other documents revealed details about Epstein's death in jail, including an email indicating that prison officials had planned for Epstein to share a cell with Cesar Sayoc, the Trump supporter serving 20 years for sending pipe bombs to Democrats and to CNN in 2018. It's unclear if Epstein and Sayoc ever lived together. Epstein died by suicide on August 10, 2019, a few weeks after that email was sent. The files also showed that federal prosecutors collected evidence of at least 10 co-conspirators. In email exchanges from July 2019, officials discussed locating 3 of 10 co-conspirators in Boston, New York City, and Connecticut, who were served grand jury subpoenas. Yet only 2 people have ever been charged in connection with Epstein, Epstein himself and Ghislaine Maxwell. So who are the other 8 co-conspirators? Why weren't they prosecuted? The files don't answer these questions. The response from survivors of Epstein's abuse has been scathing. Over a dozen survivors issued a joint letter to Congress, urging lawmakers to hold the DOJ accountable. The letter stated that the DOJ release was riddled with abnormal and extreme redactions with no explanation. The survivors pointed out that numerous victim identities were left unredacted, causing real and immediate harm, while other information that should have been public was heavily redacted. The survivors wrote, "It is alarming that the United States Department of Justice, the very agency tasked with upholding the law, has violated the law, both by withholding massive quantities of documents and by failing to redact survivor identities." Think about what they're saying. The DOJ broke the law in 2 opposite ways simultaneously. They withheld documents that should have been released, and they released information about victims that should have been protected. The survivors also criticized how difficult it was to search through the documents. There's no categorization, no timeline, no index. Files have alphanumeric names with no indication of what they contain. The survivors said it was challenging or impossible to locate files relevant to their own cases. Furthermore, the DOJ failed to communicate with victims about what information was being released, despite repeated requests. The Epstein Files Transparency Act required the DOJ to notify victims before releasing information about them. Multiple survivors say this didn't happen. Some survivors received death threats after their information was inadvertently exposed in the files. One survivor, who goes by Jane Doe, told reporters that her name was not properly redacted in multiple places. She said she was put in danger by the DOJ's failure to protect her identity. Haley Robson, another survivor, gave an interview saying she would love to see President Trump impeached over the handling of the investigation. Robson said she previously supported Trump but now says, "I redact any support I've ever given to him, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel. I am so disgusted with this administration. I think that Pam Bondi and Kash Patel both need to resign, and I would love to see number 47 get impeached over this." When asked if Attorney General Bondi should be held in contempt, Robson said, "Bondi needs to be held more than in contempt. Absolutely." These are powerful statements from people who were victimized by Epstein and are now, in their view, being victimized again by a DOJ that has mishandled the release of their personal information. President Trump's response to the document releases has been telling. On Monday, December 22nd, Trump made his first public comments about the Epstein files since the DOJ began releasing them. Speaking at Mar-a-Lago, Trump bemoaned what he called the reputational damage inflicted on people who appear in photos with Epstein. Trump said, "A lot of people are very angry that pictures are being released of other people that really had nothing to do with Epstein. But they're in a picture with him because he was at a party, and you ruined a reputation of somebody." Trump insisted the files were only made public because of an effort to distract from his accomplishments. He suggested that people photographed with Epstein at social events were being unfairly maligned. Trump also said he hated to see so many photos of former President Bill Clinton in the files, even though Clinton is a political opponent. This framing, that releasing the photos is somehow unfair to people who were photographed with Epstein, is notable given that Trump signed the law requiring the release. Behind the scenes, frustration has been mounting inside the White House about the handling of the files. The drip, drip, drip nature of the releases has prolonged a story Trump has long been reluctant to discuss. Each new batch of documents generates new headlines, and the administration's messaging has shifted dramatically over recent days. Initially, Trump and his allies promoted the transparency law as evidence of their commitment to accountability. But as documents mentioning Trump continued to emerge, the tone changed to complaints about unfair coverage and reputational damage. There was also controversy over a photo that was temporarily removed from the DOJ website. The photo showed a collection of framed and unframed images from Epstein's desk, including pictures of Trump with groups of women, Trump with Melania Trump alongside Epstein and Maxwell, and other high-profile figures like Bill Clinton and Pope John Paul II. The DOJ removed the photo shortly after releasing it, sparking immediate speculation about whether they were trying to protect Trump. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said they removed it because the Southern District of New York flagged concerns about women in the photo potentially being victims. After backlash, the DOJ restored the photo, stating, "After the review, it was determined there is no evidence that any Epstein victims are depicted in the photograph, and it has been reposted without any alteration or redaction." But the episode fueled concerns about selective withholding of information, especially given that the photo prominently featured Trump. Let me summarize some of the other significant revelations from the documents that have been released so far. FBI technical engineers described the massive amount of material seized from Epstein's Manhattan townhouse and his island in the Caribbean. One official wrote, "We are talking about terabytes worth of data over multiple forms of digital evidence: phones, tablets, loose media, cameras, DVRs, servers, laptops, and desktop computers. We have gotten past encryption on multiple devices." This indicates the FBI has access to vast amounts of Epstein's digital communications and potentially compromising material. Yet most of this has not been released, and it's unclear what happened to it. The documents also revealed more details about notable figures' connections to Epstein. Former Treasury Secretary Larry Summers and former Barclays CEO Jess Staley were both made executors of Epstein's will. The documents provide more context about their previously known associations with Epstein. There were also revelations about Epstein's fraudulent passport. After his 2019 arrest, prosecutors revealed that authorities found an expired Austrian passport with Epstein's picture, but a different name during a search of his Manhattan mansion. The passport, issued in the 1980s, listed a Saudi Arabian residence and featured stamps from France, Spain, Saudi Arabia, the United Kingdom, and other countries. The passport became evidence that Epstein was a flight risk and should be detained pending trial. The files also include details about Prince Andrew, now formally Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, after being stripped of his royal titles. One document shows a tense exchange between federal prosecutors and Prince Andrew's lawyer after the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York said the former prince provided zero cooperation with the Epstein investigation. Another intriguing detail involves emails sent by someone using the alias The Invisible Man, with the sign-off A. In 2001, this person sent an email to Maxwell asking, "Have you found me some new inappropriate friends?" Maxwell replied, "So sorry to disappoint you, however the truth must be told. I have only been able to find appropriate friends." A separate email address attributed to the Duke of York in the files also sent emails under the alias The Invisible Man, suggesting Prince Andrew may have used this pseudonym. Let me lay out the major questions that remain unanswered. First, what's in the million additional documents the DOJ just discovered? They say they need a few more weeks to review them. But will these documents shed light on co-conspirators? Will they include the missing financial records? Will they explain why the FBI sat on Maria Farmer's 1996 complaint for 23 years? Second, who are the 8 other co-conspirators that were never charged? The documents reference 10 co-conspirators total. Epstein and Maxwell make 2. Who are the other 8? Were they ever seriously investigated? Third, what happened to all the digital evidence the FBI collected? Terabytes of data from phones, computers, servers. Where did it go? What did it show? Has anyone been held accountable based on that evidence? Fourth, why did the DOJ repeatedly fail to act on warnings about Epstein dating back decades? There were complaints to the FBI in the 1990s. There were allegations during the 2008 Florida prosecution that resulted in a sweetheart deal. How did he continue operating for so long with so many people aware of his crimes? Fifth, what role did powerful institutions play in protecting Epstein? Not just individuals, but the systems, the networks, the mechanisms by which Epstein was able to operate with impunity for so long. And finally, will there be any real accountability? Will anyone else face charges? Will there be meaningful reforms to prevent this from happening again? Right now, the answer to most of these questions is, we don't know. And the DOJ's handling of this release doesn't inspire confidence that we'll get answers anytime soon. So here's where we are. The DOJ was required by law to release all Epstein-related files by December 19th. They released a partial, heavily redacted batch and missed critical documents. 5 days later, on Christmas Eve, they announced they'd found over 1 million more documents and need a few more weeks. Survivors are angry that their identities weren't protected while information about powerful people was heavily redacted. Lawmakers from both parties are threatening contempt charges and calling for testimony under oath. A bipartisan group of senators has requested an audit of the DOJ's compliance with the law. The documents that have been released show extensive connections between Epstein and numerous powerful figures, including Trump and Clinton, though neither has been accused of crimes by law enforcement. They reveal FBI failures to act on warnings going back decades. They show that at least 8 co-conspirators were identified, but never charged. And now we're told there are 1 million more documents to review, which will take weeks more to release. The question is whether we're ever going to get full transparency and accountability, or whether this will be another case of powerful institutions protecting themselves and their own. I'll continue following this story as more documents are released and as Congress responds. This is far from over. If you want to stay updated, subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. And let me know in the comments what you think. Are we getting closer to the truth, or is this just another cover-up? This is Bill Harris, and I'll see you in the next one.